Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a geopolitical chain reaction, one that starts with a single declaration in Washington and ends with flaming helicopters in a South American jungle and a tense naval standoff in the Middle East. This is the story of how one grab for oil lit a match that set the whole world on fire.
Okay, so let's dive right in. It all kicks off in January of 2026. You've got President Trump stepping up to a podium at the White House, and he declares this swift, decisive victory. And the message? It's crystal clear. Venezuela has been liberated, its dictator is gone, and all of that vast oil wealth, well, it's officially open for business.
And we're talking about a huge prize here, an estimated 300 billion barrels of heavy crude oil. I mean, to put that into perspective for you, that is the largest proven oil reserve on the entire planet. The goal was to get that oil flowing fast, with American companies like Chevron and Exxon just lining up to pour in billions.
So, the mission itself, it was called Operation Absolute Resolve. Now, officially, it was all framed as a humanitarian and counter-narcotics op, but on the ground, Delta Force operators stormed Caracas, grabbed President Maduro, and flew him right out of the country. Yeah, nobody was really fooled. This was about one thing: securing the oil.
But that triumphant speech, that whole quick victory thing, yeah, it started to unravel, and fast. The reality on the ground was so much messier, way more complicated, and it was quickly turning into what you'd call a classic quagmire.
And it didn't take long for the experts, seasoned guys like former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, to start using that exact word, quagmire. They saw all the warning signs. That initial deployment of 15,000 U.S. troops, it was obvious it wasn't going to be nearly enough. Things were about to get very, very ugly.
And this is where things get really interesting, because the war completely transformed. Pro-Maduro militias, they called them colectivos, and these battle-hardened ELN rebels, they didn't fight head-on, no way. Instead, they just vanished into the jungles and launched this brutal guerrilla campaign. They were bombing pipelines, sniping at U.S. patrols, and using those established cartel drug routes to smuggle in weapons. The parallels to the Vietnam War became impossible to ignore.
The human cost of all this was just staggering. See, even before the invasion, Venezuela was already in the middle of a massive refugee crisis. Over 7 million people had already fled. This new war, it just caused that number to explode. Millions more were now desperately trying to escape the violence.
And here's the thing, right? The fallout didn't just stay inside Venezuela's borders. A torrent of refugees flooded into neighboring Colombia and Brazil. And from there, many of them started this brutal, treacherous journey through the Darien Gap. That's this dense, roadless jungle, and ended up overwhelming immigration camps all the way at the U.S. southern border.
So, you'd think with all this chaos in Venezuela they'd pump the brakes, right? Nope. Despite everything, the administration back in Washington felt like they had it under control. With Venezuelan oil as their sort of insurance policy, they decided it was time to roll the dice on an even bigger, even more dangerous gamble on the other side of the globe.
And this just shows you how fast everything can spiral out of control. On day one, the U.S. launches Operation Eternal Shield, hitting Iran's nuclear facilities, apparently at Israel's request. By day three, Iran hits back by doing the unthinkable. They blockade the Strait of Hormuz with mines, drones, missiles, the whole shebang. And just like that, the tap is shut off for 20% of the world's daily oil supply.
So when the world's most critical oil choke point just slams shut, well, the economic fallout isn't some abstract idea. It's real, it's immediate, and it hits everybody, everywhere.
I mean, just look at these numbers. It's insane. The price of a barrel of oil didn't just climb, it shot into orbit. It goes from a stable $100, doubles to $200 almost overnight, and then peaks at an incredible $300 a barrel. This triggered a global energy crisis, the likes of which we hadn't seen in 50 years.
And when a shock like that hits the system, everything just stops. Supply chains completely collapsed, factories went dark. The engine of the global economy just sputtered and seized.
And this wasn't just numbers on a screen. This had real-world, everyday impacts. In the US and Europe, you've got these long, snaking lines at gas stations. In Germany, the powerhouse auto industry was basically crippled. In Japan, which gets 90% of its oil through that strait, they literally dimmed the lights in Tokyo to save power. It got so bad Japan had to send its navy to the Middle East, which was a huge move for them.
So while the rest of the world is just trying to cope, America's rivals? Well, they see the chaos in Venezuela not as a crisis, but as an opening. A golden opportunity, really. And they moved in to turn a regional mess into a full-blown global proxy war.
So you have Russia and China, and they play this very clever, coordinated game.
China's playing the long game, worried about its own oil, so it avoids getting its hands dirty directly. Instead, it funnels money and support through Russia. Russia, on the other hand, they go all in. They see a chance to bleed American forces and prestige, right in their own backyard.
And Russia wasn't just throwing money at the problem. No, their support was smart. It was tactical. They sent in military advisors to train the guerrillas. They smuggled in all the battlefield essentials, AK-47s, RPGs, night vision goggles. The goal was dead simple: make this fight as bloody and expensive for U.S. troops on the ground as humanly possible.
But here's the craziest part, the real kicker. That global spike in oil prices, the one caused directly by the U.S. intervention, it ended up doubling Russia's oil revenues. It was a massive windfall. And what did Moscow do with all that extra cash? They plowed it right back into funding their ongoing war in Ukraine. The U.S. inadvertently financed its rival's war effort.
So let's just step back for a second. Just a few months after that big victory speech, the whole situation had morphed into an absolute nightmare. The SWIFT operation was now a bloody, multi-front, and seemingly endless war. What started as this clean, simple plan to secure oil had created a world where you're watching the news and seeing burning U.S. helicopters in a Venezuelan jungle on one side of the screen and a tense naval standoff in the Persian Gulf on the other. The shadow of oil had fallen over the entire globe. Which really leaves us with this one final haunting question. When a conflict has no clear battlefields, no well-defined enemy, and no end in sight, what does winning even look like? In a shadow war fought for a resource when the battle lines are invisible, maybe nobody really wins. Maybe the only thing that comes out on top is the chaos itself.